We've made a deal today where we are going to be sending them weapons and they're going to be paying for them.
Donald Trump hammers out a deal with the EU through NATO to buy a lot of American munitions, weapons, missiles, and all kinds of other armaments, leaving Mark Carney in the Canadian market far behind yet again. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I think Canadians can all agree that Mark Carney has not followed through on a single campaign promise. Many of the things that he said on the campaign trail have not only has he not accomplished them, but there are lots of other things that are proven to have been flat out the opposite of reality, the opposite of genuine. And that's just being gracious. And I believe that we need to, as Canadians, examine just how poorly the Liberal government is performing, even outside of Parliament. Now, we have a track record in Canada of the Liberal Party destroying housing, destroying immigration, destroying the economy, destroying jobs. And they have been promising that all of these wonderful moves that they're going to be making are going to change that. Then Donald Trump comes on the scene, says, you know what, the whole world is paying tariffs. Now, Canadian politicians and the Liberal or on the far left think that Canada should be exempt of all of these tariffs. I don't know why they think that we should be treated so specially. And then, of course, the people in the center and on the right are trying to convince the government that we should stop focusing on what the Americans are doing and start focusing on how we can emulate the American system, how we can take what they're doing and implant it into our country so that we can experience the same enormous growth that the American economy and as a result, and by extension, the people of America are experiencing. Mark Carney doesn't want to do any of that because that would mean relinquishing control. That would mean that we would have to make a smaller government. We would have to decentralize our government. We would have to emulate the system. We would have to be inviting billions of dollars of industry into the country, promising them a return on an investment without all of the policies that the Liberal government and the NDP by extension have implemented in Canada, making doing business here in this country nearly impossible and very uncertain. Like we don't see the businesses that you see going into the United States don't see the uncertainty that the rest of the Canadian media and the Canadian politicians are trying to make you believe. Saying that we may have Bill 69 and may not have 69 or 48, we might not. We're going to have this kind of income tax or carbon tax, not that kind of carbon. All of that leads to uncertainty. All of that leads to any businessman who's trying to do an investment to say there is too much gray zone there, even if we want to take it at their word, even if we just give the Liberal Party at their word. There's too much uncertainty, there's too much instability, and we cannot invest in this country. We will go to the United States where at least we know what the rules are going to be. There's going to be a 15% corporate sales tax or corporate tax, and that's about it, and that's about all. All of the state regulations will, of course, have to be adhered to, and many of the states are offering up very juicy deals on their regulations. By contrast, Canada is a shaky ground filled with political instability, filled with political inconsistency, filled with political upheaval. So that cannot be taken. Well, there's only one conclusion to draw from that, and that is it's not a good place to invest. And so, best of luck to you. That's what the corporations are trying to say. Even Mark Carney knows that with all of the money that he invests in the United States and none in Canada in his personal portfolio. Another campaign inconsistency, shall we call it. Now, Melanie Joly made this grandiose announcement, or made a big deal about making a very small announcement. And Donald Trump, at the same time, was completely turning that announcement on its head. But before we get to that and how it makes the Liberal government look like amateurs, rank amateurs, and how Canadians need to realize that it's time that we started to get some leadership that's actually going to fix our problems instead of looking over the fence at the neighbor and trying to criticize and try to say how their pool is terrible while we're slipping in the mud, right? So it's time we started to just be honest and direct with one another. Before we get to that, however, we're going to be looking at something that the Natural Resources Minister had announced quietly while I believe he was in PEI.
In Nova Scotia, we're investing $6 million in Nova Scotia Power's Advanced Distribution Grid Management Project, modernizing the distribution network with leading-edge smart grid technologies. This means cleaner, more reliable energy for homes and businesses, and a grid that is ready for the future as demand grows.
If I am honest, that sounds to me like we're giving the corporation, the Hydro Corporation in Nova Scotia, tax dollars to install digital meters that they can then flip a switch from an office somewhere to turn off. A lot of people are upset with the digital meters. Doesn't seem that the Liberal government is one of them. I don't know why taxpayers are paying for it, though. That seems a bit odd in my mind.
And in St. John, New Brunswick, another $5.25 million will be allocated to help St. John Energy launch the Advanced Digital Distribution System Operator.
Well, that sounds like exactly the same thing. So now we're at $11.5 million. The federal government is giving $11.5 million tax dollars. The federal government is giving out to these corporations so that they can install digital meters and put a lot of guys on the ground out of work because they won't need to come out and check the meter, meaning that they won't need to hire them, and they can just check it from some little computer somewhere in an office building, taking away the middleman and making sure the corporations have more control. $12 million so far. Let's see where else it goes.
We are also investing $875,000 in Antigonish, which will help the Alternative Resource Energy Authority link end user demand with local renewable power.
$875,000 to help the end user get in contact with local renewable energy. That sounds to me like we just gave $875,000 to Antigonish to have some people sit around in an office and go door to door to find out if they are interested in connecting to a wind farm or some other form of very expensive, ineffective forms of electricity. I think that we can establish that what people that are in the house want is electricity that they can have inexpensively and that they can have consistently. They don't want the power to go out, and they don't want to have to pay a lot for it. Now, I think I just saved us $875,000. Something tells me the Liberal government is going to cut that check anyway.
Dalhousie University will receive just over $700,000 to develop potential policies and regulations to better support offshore carbon storage, paving the way for innovation that will help offshore energy reduce emissions.
$700,000 we're going to give to Dalhousie University so that they can study how to do carbon capture, or how they can put regulations to make sure that that investment, that development becomes nearly impossible. Norway has a already well-established carbon capture for offshore drilling. We can simply copy their system and we have no problem at all. It's funny, when the liberals and the far left want to talk about electric cars, they say Norway, 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 Norway. But as soon as we talk about carbon capture and I say Norway, or we talk about LNG and we say Norway, the Liberal government needs to pay a university to study it. I think I just saved us $700,000. Hey, not bad. Maybe they can cut me a commission. Again, something tells me that the Dalhousie University is going to get that check, and they're probably not going to have to spend any money because they can simply Google how Norway does it and then spit that out as a report.
The government is proud to partner with Millbrook First Nation on a commitment of $1 million to build a solar farm near Truro, breathing new life into the repurposed industrial lands while ensuring equity ownership and economic opportunity stays in Indigenous hands.
Oh, come on, man. You're going to give $1 million for solar panels in Nova Scotia, and you're going to put them in one of the busiest landing zones in Nova Scotia. Landing zones for what? Tropical storms. I mean, every time a tropical storm or a hurricane hits Florida, it works its way up into Nova Scotia, bounces off the Carolinas, finds its way up, and it lands in Nova Scotia. And it typically lands right in that area. And so any solar panels, what? Unbelievable. We already know that solar panels are very expensive to install. They're very expensive to purchase. So what I'm curious to understand, what I'm curious to know, are we giving the grant to the First Nations because they have certified installers? Because this Millbrook First Nations has certified solar panel installers that are not only going to be able to put the farm up, but they're going to be able to connect it to all of the homes in that particular First Nation? Or are we now going to have to watch them try to get a contract and try to get the solar panels purchased from China, right? All of the solar panels come out of China. So whenever you hear the Liberal government say solar panels, what they're saying is we're taking hard-earned Canadian tax dollars and we're sending them to our friends in China. Are they trying to manufacture the solar panels locally? No. Are they setting up companies to manufacture solar panels for inside of our own country? No. They're giving $1 million to a First Nations band who, in all likelihood, doesn't have the certified technicians required to install them, nor do they have the connections to purchase the panels, and so on and so forth. Now, am I saying that we shouldn't be giving electricity to First Nations bands? In no way, shape, or form am I saying that. I'm saying that what you're talking about doesn't sound like it's going to have any fruition. It doesn't sound like it's going to work from where I'm sitting. It sounds to me that it'll be one of those projects that started as $1 million and finished at $100 million, and we still really don't have any electricity set up. Now we'll get to the other attempt by Melanie Joly to make herself sound like she's involved or a part of the problem-solving process.
Today marks a significant milestone in our partnership with the launch of the new Canada-EU Industry Policy Dialogue. Together, we have pledged to deepen cooperation across these critical sectors. Our defense industries, including aerospace, marine, and tech, will be better aligned and will benefit from deeper cooperation in order that we fully recognize that peace and security are the foundation of lasting prosperity. We will develop closer supply chain, particularly in vital areas such as energy and critical minerals, and by building resilient and sustainable supply networks, we will protect not only our economic security on the EU side and on the Canadian side, but also our economies from disruption, and ultimately we will protect jobs together.
Well, there you have it, everybody. The Liberal government has solved all of the economic woes of Canada because we've hammered out a deal with the EU. Well, not a deal. We're going to sit down and talk about a deal. So this is just a meeting to talk about when we might have a meeting about having a meeting, so that we can figure out how we can work together on all of the critical minerals that the EU is currently eyeing getting out of Ukraine, that the NATO, by extension, NATO is eyeing us getting all of these resources out of Ukraine. The Liberal government is sitting down with the EU in Ottawa, paid for all of that expenses, so that we could talk about having a deal maybe sooner or later. But right now, all we're going to talk about is how we got to get together to talk about it. That's all she said there, which is just more theater, right? It's just trying to stall you so that you don't realize how bad things are. And before I discuss the absurdity of trading with Europe and how the Liberal government wants to make you believe that it's going to compensate the trade issues that we're having with the United States and the absurdity, I mean, it's ridiculous. At the same time, as far as I can tell, almost at the same time as this announcement was going on, the president of NATO, or whatever he's called, was in the Oval Office with Donald Trump announcing a deal. Let's listen to the deal and how it is so terrible for both Mark Carney's position and Melanie Joly's position.
We've made a deal today where we are going to be sending them weapons and they're going to be paying for them. The United States will not be having any payment made. We are not buying it, but we will manufacture it and they're going to be paying for it. But we make the best, and we're going to be sending the best to NATO, and in some cases to maybe, at Mark's suggestion, if we go to Germany, where they're going to send early on missiles, and they'll be replaced, and NATO is going to take care of it. So in a nutshell, we're going to make top-of-the-line weapons, and they'll be sent to NATO. NATO may choose to have certain of them sent to other countries where we can get a little additional speed, where the country will release something and it'll be mostly in the form of a replacement.
I'll tell you, the more I see the moves Donald Trump's making, the more I hear the words "never say never" coming, more and more true. Mark Carney's been running up and down the country. That was his last go-to. Oh no, we're going to be investing our green steel in their munitions, and they're spending billions of dollars on arming Europe, and we're going to be part of that. Or nope, you are in fact not going to be part of that, because they have elected to get the munitions and all of the other things that go along with that from the United States. The United States is going to be selling them all of the things that they require, all of the drones and the missiles and all of the munitions and all of the individual, personnel carriers and all of that other kind of stuff. And they're immediately going to be sending it on to Ukraine, which is a horrible idea, I would just like to point out, as we can see that Ukraine is already, one of the biggest reasons that the Ukrainian conflict began was because Ukraine was looking at becoming part of NATO, and now he's giving weapons to NATO. Well, the United States is part of NATO, so he's giving weapons, and those weapons are going to be coming out of individual countries, Germany being the big one, the one country that now will not be buying any weapons from Canada. Not that we have any of our Canadian industry up and running for that. Certainly not to the degree that the Americans have it. And they hammered this deal out, and they were all very happy and chummy with one another. All the while, all those critical minerals in Ukraine are going to flow back to all of the various countries that need them. So I don't know what Melanie Joly was talking about. I certainly don't think that the Canadian voting population understands the significance of what Donald Trump just did here. All of the promises that Mark Carney made on this campaign trail, that he was not holding on to his own money or not holding on to stock from companies, that has been proven to be not accurate. Saying to you that he's going to get Europe to buy the green steel, not accurate. Saying to you that he's going to be getting in connection with Europeans' defense mechanism, not accurate. There's nothing about what he had to say on the campaign trail that you as a person who voted for Mark Carney can say, oh yeah, but look, there's not even one. It's bad, and it's getting worse every day for Canada, and these guys are still holding on to this idea that we should be worried about trading with the Americans, and somehow we're going to offset that balance by trading with Europe and Malaysia, of all places. Not that I have anything against Malaysia, but they don't have, they don't have the market like the Americans do to be buying things left, right, and center. I want you to understand something. To get the stuff over to Europe, we have to put it in a boat or maybe in a plane, but let's just focus on being in a boat. So if I'm making something in Toronto, if I'm making something in Vancouver, if I'm making something in Edmonton, if I'm making something in Montreal and I want to send it to the United States of America, I call a local trucking company. They put it on the back of the truck. They ship it down to the United States. 4 days later, I can issue my invoice and my check will start to be coming. By contrast, if I want to do that, I have to drive it by truck all the way to Halifax, where it'll be put on a boat, hopefully, and that boat will sail with 25 different orders put on it, or 100, or whatever it happens to be, and they will sail over to Europe. I'm sure it doesn't take more than 2 months. Then I can start to hope that it gets picked up from the port, say Antwerp, and delivered to the person who then receives it. And so 90 days later, I can begin to issue my invoice. Hopefully, maybe the product gets lost at sea, and then I have to start talking to the insurance company for the loss on my product. Now, I might not even know for a while if it got lost, because if I'm not sending the whole container, if I'm only sending, say, part of a container, then they will fill that container with other items. And they will have to wait. And then we have to ask ourselves, how is it that we can have this volume of traffic coming out of Halifax? I mean, I get that it's a deep water port, but it's not necessarily New York, where you have 25, 30 quays that the freight can be landed on and loaded. And so we send it into what, New York? Are we going to send the product into the United States, pay the tariff, and ship it out of New York or Boston over to Europe? You can't make up the short-sightedness. And of course, this is making me laugh, because all of the people that are putting us through this painstaking process, who can't see that Mark Carney and the Liberal Party are never going to be able to solve these problems, because the philosophy, the attitude, the way that they think is the problem. It's not who they are, it's how they think. It's the fact that they cannot see the woods for the trees. It's the fact that they are still stuck in their same ideology as when in 2015, when they came riding in on the back of all of the activists who thought that somehow they were going to change Canada. Well, you've changed it. How's that working out for you? No job, no place to live. How's that going? Sky high crime rates, dollars worth nothing. How's that working out with all of your activism? Donald Trump is making his economy explode. And I did tell all of you by this time we would know. And by September, you're going to see people just sitting on gigantic stacks of money. You're going to see a very, very stable country where people all have work. And the only reason that you don't have a job is because you are choosing not to have a job. By contrast, Canadians will be flying down into the United States to try to find work. And so we hear again, Donald Trump, never say never. And of course, the only way that we're going to be able to solve this problem is to get the people who have caused the problem, the Liberal government, out of the way. Now, we know Mark Carney wasn't honest with his disclosure on financial, like what he told Canadians and what the truth is. He has still a lot of stuff in Brookfield, and Brookfield is trying its hardest to get into the housing industry in Canada, which I don't agree with. I would rather have the house built by anybody else, because I do not like the idea of the dishonesty. I don't care about the rest of it. The rest of it doesn't bother me. I don't really care. I would pay more than to give it to people who lied to me. And that's just one example, right? We know that he can't negotiate with Donald Trump. We know that every time he tries to do something, Donald Trump snaps his fingers, and Mark Carney says, you know what, we're not going to charge that tax. We're not going to do it that way. We'll absolutely put more men on the border. So this Mr. Elbows Up, I don't even know. I don't see that anywhere. Nobody could see that anywhere. Like we told all of you, those of us that were sitting in the center, we said that Mark Carney's not, or at least I said that Mark Carney is not capable of solving this problem. And I did mention it to you out loud, and I did it based on Mark Carney's personality, right? He's not going to be the guy to solve the problem because he's never negotiated a contract. He's never had to do any of that. All he does is take corporate, like he's a corporate raider, which is a completely different policy, a completely different set of skills. And to be honest with you, you can do corporate raiding if you've got enough money. Anybody can do it. Not everybody can negotiate a deal. Not everybody can hammer it out. And NATO just decided to buy all American weapons to supply Ukraine, passing some of those weapons and munitions into other parts of the continent. So cutting Canada out of the loop yet again. Donald Trump is destroying Mark Carney, kicking the bleep right out of him. And Canadians are the ones that are paying the price for that. It's bad enough we had Justin Trudeau, and now we have this person who has just been discovered or released that he's not being honest with what he's telling Canadians from the microphone on the campaign trail. And we can see the proof that is in the pudding about how poorly he is doing in negotiations with the United States. And Canadians are going to be the ones that are paying the price, all because of their ideology, all because of their net zero and all the rest of that foolishness. I think people who voted for Mark Carney need to realize that there's just no rainbow around the corner. The only thing that's coming our way is hardship. And you need to be putting pressure on your local governments to get a new election so we can have a do-over. I'm going to wrap here. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next time.